Okay, there's the stream is live. Give it a second, make sure it's recording. Welcome everyone to the NCL Spirit Week Chat with the Game Creators. I'm going to be your host tonight, Tristan. Joining me is Jen and Kiwi, also from Cyber Skyline, and we have a special guest tonight, Eno from CrowdStrike. Thank you for joining us. So, if we give us a second and we will pull up our little slide with all of the questions, and then we can get to answering all of your questions from the individual game and team game. This is both.
Please questions.
While we're pulling that up, oh, never mind. There we go. Where are we starting?
Before we quite start, I just want to let the audience all know that they can go over to Slido, join, and then this is where you can ask your questions. We're going to try and monitor the chat during it. I think that I am pointing towards the QR code. I don't know if that way.
I think it's that way, right?
It is the opposite mirror than from how I see it. Scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter in that join code. Ask us your questions here. You can also upvote questions based on what other people asked if you want to hear them. We will try and monitor the chat, but this is the best chance you have for making sure your question gets answered. So
we can start with the first one, I guess.
Yeah. So the first question is asked by Oak Tree. Oak Tree asks, what is some lore about Liberate we haven't heard yet? Also, is there any strategy you approach making web app exploitation challenges?
So address the lore about Liberate first. I think we play around with a lot of lore. Jen is our lore master or lore mistress. She's come up with some really, really cool ideas and interesting stories behind it. But I don't know if I should say this, but in all honesty, we kind of create the lore as we make the challenges, and things happen and things come up as we're building things. And it's oh, we can tie this into this thing and tie this into that thing. So it's very much organic, and it happens on the fly. And go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say, I've been working with Eddie, who's not here tonight, and we talk about the lore frequently. And actually, one of the recent things that we added to team game and individual game was another cybercrime group called Domination, and actually was kind of inspired from some of the work I know about that CrowdStrike does, because they do a lot with trying to figure out what hacking group does what, some sort of attribution work. And so I was thinking, what if there was another hacking group that kind of spun off of Liberation? There was some internal strife and they kind of branched off. So we've been kind of toying with some new ideas with that. There was one challenge we made with GPG signing in the crypto challenge where it was a conversation between two Liberation agents, and they were talking about what to get for dinner, what would they talk about, sort of things, if they were, in a real crime group. I don't know, if you have any insight into that, what would a real crime group sort of discuss?
We do have a little bit of insight because I think maybe earlier this year, there was the leak of all of the Black Basta ransomware group chat logs. So I think you can just go read them, and somebody was training AI models and whatnot on them. So you could go have conversations and ask it questions and such. But, they talk about their various victims. They talk about other ransomware groups. They talk about all the various operations. It's pretty interesting stuff. And very little of it is in English.
Also super interesting.
And then I think the second question is, what logic or what is our pathway? Let me see what the actual question was. It was what is the strategy you approach in making web application exploitation challenges with?
So to best answer that, we generally pick a vulnerability that is fairly common, and we try and showcase it in a way that is easy for and digestible for the players to understand. So Our goal isn't to like try and trick you in making you like go through and enumerate an entire app. We try and make it so that like the vulnerability is right there so that you can focus on actually learning about how to exploit the web app. A lot of the times, for those that don't know, web apps tend to be an initial vector. I'm sure you end up seeing that a lot. If you have anything you would like to comment about some fun stories.
Yeah. I would say anecdotally, we do see threat actors targeting web apps as an initial access vector pretty regularly, whether that's via, all previously documented CVEs in like, web apps that are sold as a SaaS platform or something, or they're, an open source e-commerce platform or something of that nature, where there's vulnerabilities baked into every single instance of it, or whether that's, custom web apps that are, written by our clients. We do see all of the above being exploited by threat actors of all different flavors, both e-crime and nation state.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, when I'm building out my vulnerable web apps, especially for the hard ones, I try to build off of things that I have seen in the past. So, the team game hard web app challenge was kind of infamous, but in reality, that like is almost one-to-one to a vulnerability that I found in another website, just without a lot of functionality, because I feel like adding in a bunch of other functionality into a web app will have people rabbit holing down pathways that they really shouldn't for a 3-day challenge. But outside of that, like for easy and medium, we try to make it so that you can go and test your knowledge. And then for hard, at least on my end, I try to make it so that you experience something that I've experienced. And if that's too difficult, there will be hints there to support you on still making the success happen.
Okay, I think we can move on to our next question. Our next one is, one of the log files used social media data. Was that realistic? How would someone actually analyze social media data in the real world? I'm assuming that this one is talking about the leaked information from the challenge that Jen made. Do you want to like talk about that at all?
I think the idea behind this data leak was that your personal data is kind of leaked to many different outlets if it ever gets leaked. I don't know that data necessarily would be the stuff that was leaked. I think, though, in the spirit of it, like things that could be leaked would be your name and a bunch of other random stats, not necessarily like all of the good stuff, like your name and your password and all of those sort of things that would gain entry, but it might be other information, like how many likes that you've given or something of that nature, where it's just kind of like, meh, this really doesn't tell me that much about you. But in that sense, I don't know. I'm not really sure how somebody would analyze that in the real world. I don't know if you want to speak to that,
Yeah,
I think, might have some experience with that, especially with
In I would say in the past, 12 months or so, specifically at CrowdStrike, we've seen quite a substantial spike in in incidents where the adversary is one that we track as Famous Cholima, which is a Democratic People's Republic of Korea threat actor that poses as like Western IT workers and tries to get hired at Western companies, primarily in Europe and the United States and Canada and elsewhere, under fraudulent means. So using, various stolen identities and fake LinkedIn profiles. And so the point that I'm making here is that one of the ways that we're able to track that adversary and all of the various personas that they're using to get hired is with social media data.
I don't know how much you can talk about this. This might be a little bit more close to chest, but I'm curious where fingerprinting plays into that and where like social media fingerprinting can be actually used to track down adversaries.
That kind of does start to enter into the methods and tradecraft things where like I don't want to give too much away because I don't want some North Korean watching this recording later and like knowing how we're tracking them.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But yeah, I would say that their social media profiles are a very public forum where they're, you know, posting a lot of data, and we can use that data.
Okay, so we are bringing our next question up. So someone is asking, for scanning and medium, specifically in the team game, how did they know they were supposed to edit the firewall config when it's against the NCL rules of conduct? I will go ahead and say that that part of the rules of conduct specifically is talking about the non-challenge infrastructure. If we give you that, or the shared challenge infrastructure, if we give you your own instance of something, you are allowed to like look at the configuration and figure out what is potentially stopping things from occurring. That being said, if you mess up your stuff, we can tell that you messed it up. So like, don't shoot yourself in the foot.
But also on top of that, yeah, I mean, your Docker container is not technically part of our infrastructure. If you have a Docker container and you're interacting with whatever's in there, that's perfectly fine. If you find like a breakout method, or if you somehow have access to our infrastructure and you're on like our backend stuff, and then you play with the firewall rules, that's when things get really sticky. If there's any doubt, my recommendation is always to check in, make a ticket, and say, hey, I see that there's a firewall running here. I have access this way. Is this within scope? And you know, if it's within your machine and you've had access to it through your terminal, most of the time we'll say, yes, this is in scope. You can go ahead and mess with the firewall however you want. So yeah, you can always check in with us if you're worried that like you may have accidentally broken out of something.
I think it breaks the rules of conduct if it affects the running of the general competition. If other people can't complete a challenge because you went ahead and broke our firewall on our back end, I think that's breaking the rules. You know, other players can't play the game then. But yeah, if you kind of, you know, mess up your container, that's just your container. That's not affecting anybody else.
Okay, so that was just a quick thing for us to address. Let's move on to the next question. So someone was asking who created the Pierce Store web app and made them update Stardew Valley. That was me. It's no secret that a lot of like the time we base like a bunch of like characters in logs or web apps off of either video game characters, sitcom characters, or name your favorite pop culture. So the premise of that application was it was a SQL injection attack where specifically you had to use a union query to be able to get the data out that you wanted. Again, we've kind of covered how web apps can be a vector of getting things. You know, how frequently would you say that you see SQL injection going on now?
Unfortunately, frequently, I guess is what I would say. You know, somewhat recently we had an engagement where there was a custom web app that, you know, was proprietary to the client that they then, you know, would sell to their customers that had a SQL injection vulnerability in it that was actively being exploited. And, you know, we were only able to identify that by having gone through the logs that custom web app generated. And the threat actor basically made a mistake in their SQL injection one time, and it caused the entire body of their SQL query to get logged. And so we were able to, you know, identify where the SQL injection was occurring as a result of that.
Our next question is, who is the cat called LV? Kiwi, I think you have some answers on that.
For those who are unaware, this was an OSINT challenge that I'm pretty sure gave multiple people aneurysms while they were trying to complete it. LV is Loverboy. I think at this point it's become a meme, but I'll say it anyways. He is a cat within the Meow Wolf Omega Mart, like actual Omega Mart. And a part of the game is you get to see these cats in their little fake machines that they have running all across El Mega Mart. Unfortunately, that is not LV. But that being said, somehow LV had better OPSEC than like 99% of things and people out there, which was super fun.
I'm glad we got to finally answer that question. Tristan, you're muted.
I didn't think that Kiwi's going to answer the question as fast. I got to figure out what we're going to answer next.
We can answer the next one because it ties right in, right? How do you create OSINT challenges? Yep. I learned a lot from completing some of them. Jen, you want to share your perspective?
I think for me, I kind of look at, all right, I need to figure this out for myself. Like the nostalgia one that I made was something that I have been trying to figure out for years. But only until recently, till Google got just, I don't know, really good. And then the question just came back up in my mind. Where did I buy these clog shoes when I went on my trip? Did I think like, oh my gosh, I really need to like figure this out now. And then that became a challenge. So yeah, and then, oh my gosh, I almost didn't make it in the game, honestly, if it wasn't for Eddie coming and being like, you need to figure this out. Just keep at it, Jen. Like it took me a whole weekend because I wasn't using the picture that was then used in the challenge. I was looking at some other pictures because to me, it just seemed so obvious when you included the words that people would figure it out. But turns out it wasn't straightforward. So I don't know, but what about you, Kiwi?
From me, I start with something that I know, some concepts, some information that I am aware of, and then I sort of start researching that information, right? So for recently, you might be interested in this. One of our challenges was related to Phineas Fisher. And for those of you who don't know, he's a pretty famous, like, old hacker who hacked a bunch of banks. So I knew about him. I really liked his work, and I was interested in it. And I was like, what is another step further? So I just started doing research on him, seeing like what he did in the past. And then I found out that he made a Bitcoin donation to an organization. I'm pretty sure I want to say Kurdistan, but I could be wrong. And then I was like, well, can I track that Bitcoin payment that he did? And I was able to successfully track it. And I was like, okay, I have a pathway for solving this. Is it possible for other people? Yes. I tie that, and then I make a challenge. And then something else that I do is I often tie challenges in to real life OSINT investigations that I have done. The weird like Telegram social media thing, like I have done that almost one-to-one. Almost like very, very similar situation. And so that ties into it as well, because I try to replicate some realistic scenario that I have experienced or I know other people have experienced while making the challenge doable for, middle, high school, and college students.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, did you mention on this call to all of our audience what you do for CrowdStrike?
I don't know. I am an incident response consultant for CrowdStrike. So when, large companies or universities or public school districts or government agencies or whomever suffers an incident and is breached by a threat actor, they can call us. We have a number, it's manned 24/7. And then my team gets spun up to help them investigate the who, what, when, where, why from start to finish and put the pieces together for what happened in that breach.
So a lot of what you do is like more forensics, analysis sort of work. Do you do any sort of OSINT at all that gets applied or on the side with that?
Yeah. So, so oftentimes we are dealing with, threat actors coming from specific infrastructure that might be public IP addresses associated with a given, VPS like hosting provider, whether it's CloudZ or whether it's Vulture or, whatever else. And so sometimes we're able to take those IP addresses and then identify, maybe there's host names tied to them, like DNS records. Maybe there's, interesting geolocation information associated with threat actor infrastructure. And we can kind of pivot from there. occasionally, and actually somewhat frequently, threat actors will maintain their own social media presence, whether that's, you know, on dark web forums or whether that's on Twitter or wherever else. And so occasionally that can be useful information as we're conducting our investigation. Like, oh, maybe they're talking about a specific thing. Let me go and try and hunt for that thing in the victim's environment and see if that's relevant. But yeah, it definitely does come up. There's a lot of fun things to do with OSINT. I love CTF, so it's just like a fun skill to have in my back pocket as well, where, you know, various things come around and I get to go, I don't know, find some random gas station in Australia off of a picture.
You're well-rounded, so to speak.
Before we move to our next question, Eno, you actually used to play in NCL. Do you want to talk about your experience playing it all?
I loved NCL. I was, you know, even in college, I was a sucker for like the forensic stuff because it was what I was good at. And so every single time NCL would come around, I would make a beeline for the various forensics and network analysis and log analysis challenges and just 100 to 0 them as fast as I could. You know, I lack red team skills like entirely. I'm bad at it. It's not my strong suit. So I would always struggle on the web app stuff. I would, you know, the password cracking stuff. Like I know what Hashcat is, and that's pretty much where my knowledge stops. But yeah, no, I loved NCL. I did it pretty much every semester I was available. It was a ton of fun. You know, also interesting, just like, you know, going to those talks with CrowdStrike recruiters and whatnot that NCL does, and then coming on full time at CrowdStrike and like working with those same recruiters was kind of cool. It's like, oh yeah, I know you. But yeah, no, big NCL fan.
It's really interesting hearing your perspective because I honestly struggle with the forensics challenges that like Jen and Eddie create and the packet analysis and all of those other ones. Like the incident response stuff, I look at it and I'm like, I have no idea. Like, you know, 50,000 lines in a log, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And a lot of it
love
is
that.
like, and for me, it's like, oh, if I can like break a binary, that's where I like being. So it's really cool to like hear you express like you play to your strengths, and that's how you found your,
yeah,
you know, place in security.
Yeah, no, I love myself some big logs. Dealing with an engagement right now where we have clients who are generating hundreds of gigs worth of logs every single day, and we have to navigate like months and months and months worth of activity. So big data, lots of grep. It's a good time.
These are logs containing text, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's hundreds of gigs a day.
Uh-huh.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Nope.
So the next question we have is somebody is asking, please cover the DPA question. So for those that don't know, that's the power analysis question. They were not sure how to get a bit of the key from the power traces. Kiwi, do you want to?
So for the person that asked this question, this Tuesday, I actually answered some of that already. If you join our Discord and you verify, you'll get access to the, let me double check what it's called here. No answer, only methodologies, chat, like thread chat.
Channel,
that's what it is. And then you can find the crypto hard discussion. And I actually have shared my solve script. 2 other people have shared their solve scripts. Some people have actually found applications and tools that do it, which has been super cool. And sort of, I also have a blog post if you want to take a look at that sort of explains how it all works. I highly recommend you do your research. You look into how and why it is that microprocessors and FPGAs use different amounts of power when they're performing encryption on a key. It is super interesting. It is very, very fundamental to how, honestly, anything works on hardware. And you would be surprised how early and niche this concept is. Differential power analysis and side channel attacks and fault injection in general is still a very, very new category in terms of security, and there's not enough people in it. If you're interested in like these niche this awkward area between software and hardware where you can actually like play around with both. I highly recommend you look into those types of concepts.
Okay, our next question is, how do you make problems with a subjective nature, such as which user is the most likely to be compromised in log file analysis? And the answer for this is that in the real world, while I understand, like from a challenge perspective, how that can seem very vague, that's kind of the question you're given. And we try when we are making questions like that to understand that there are potentially multiple ways that you can get to that answer, and you could have multiple different answers. We try and accept as many of them as we can. But at the end of the day, and I'm sure you can attest to this as someone who looks through logs for a living, you don't necessarily get like an easy answer of like, this is how the person is guilty. You have to figure out why a certain like log is suspicious.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the most challenging things about my job, and is one of those things where you can kind of teach yourself a lot of the technical skills, but building that analytical mindset or investigative mindset where you're trying to figure out, taking disparate data sources from 3 or 4 different places and putting them all together to identify like, this is the thing I need to go look for, can be really challenging. So and then the other factor of that is that aside from just doing a like post-mortem investigation, part of my job is also the incident response piece, not just the digital forensics. So it's also advising the client on what actions they need to take to evict threat actors from their environment to prevent bad things from happening. And so it's important that we're able to, determine what is going to be the highest priority remediation action that you can take, whether that's, sever the Active Directory connection between your vCenter and your on-prem AD environment, or whether that's, disable outbound internet access and just like take everything completely offline. It's important for us to be able to make those kind of decisions about here's what's most important for our client and here's what's, less important, so that we can, tell them those sorts of things. But that can be challenging, being able to make those determinations, especially with a limited data set.
Yeah, and I will also say, like, in terms of subjectivity, right? Unfortunately, does not have this the pleasure of getting like 4 or 5 separate checks for a week-long process when like things are happening right there and then. So there's a little bit more. It's actually a lot higher risk for right? Like you sort of have to figure out these things sometimes within hours or days, depending on how deep that threat actor has gotten ingrained within the system, right?
Yeah, I mean, we pretty regularly observe threat actors. We call it dwell time or breakout time, which is kind of the amount of time that it takes to go from, the point of initial access to the point of the threat actor has accomplished their goal. And that goal can be, data encryption with ransomware, or data exfiltration, or, if it's a nation state adversary, more often it'll be espionage, and they'll sit there for years and just slowly siphon off your data. But in the cases of ransomware, oftentimes those dwell times, breakout times, are like matters of hours, where the threat actor will be present in your environment on April 18th, and by April 18th at 8 p.m., your entire environment is hosed. And so that's why, kind of circling back a little bit, is like when we're coming up with those recommendations for clients about here are the actions you need to take, it's really important that people listen. And it's really important that we're also able to back up our recommendations with facts, because oftentimes the recommendations that we're giving them can cause business outages, whether that's like, we want you to do an enterprise password reset and now none of your users can log in until they reset their passwords. Things of that nature, where it's, it can cause business outage, and convincing a client that needs to happen can be challenging. And so if we're able to come to them and be like, you need to reset all of your enterprise passwords because, here is your ntds.dit file going out the door, that can be more impactful. And so being able to find those answers and find those facts that we can use to support our recommendations quickly and accurately is really important.
Thanks. I actually didn't know that dwell time, especially for ransomware, could actually be a matter of hours. I normally in my head, I think like, oh, a couple of days, they'll have to like gain initial access and then, escalate privileges, hot from different systems. But security is thankfully a very good job field to be in right now.
It does depend, obviously. Sometimes there are absolutely incidents where from initial access to encryption can be a matter of days. And it just depends on a lot of different factors, the size of the environment, how flat the network is, the level of access at the start, that kind of thing.
And then in terms of subjective challenges, like my best answer for that is, look, we'll go through about 4 rounds of quality assurance, especially for team game stuff. We all sanity check each other's challenges. We make sure that we can walk through 0 to hero and actually succeed. And then we actually have a team of contractors that we have a final QA round through them so that we have a fresh pair of eyes on the stuff we're working on. That minimizes as much subjectivity as we can. Sometimes it will be like, oh, this person is like 10% more likely than than person Y, and you answer person Y and you get it incorrect. And like part of that is going to be, look, yes, it was a 10% difference, and in the field, that 10% difference may be the difference between your infrastructure getting shut down or not.
I think there's something that maybe the person who wrote in this question hasn't considered, and that is that maybe it's not like subjective. Maybe there's actually something going on in the log that you didn't notice. Because I know one of the logs I developed, there was a logical method of attack where a device outside of the network was sending SYN packets to a bunch of devices on the network. One of those devices accepted that packet and then started Christmas tree attack on a number of other devices within the network. And that is one way that you can compromise a network. Like if you look through the log, you might actually see evidence that you maybe isn't there on the face. And like, has to go through thousands of lines, I'm sure. Not just lines, but like gigs of data. Like there are tons of lines to go through, and it's just trying to figure out what is happening there.
Yeah, it's being able to recognize those types of patterns and, figure out what they mean in terms of the context of an incident is hard and important.
And I'm sure you have special tools, though, as a part of CrowdStrike to help you go through that. Tristan, I know there's one question about tools. I don't know if you want to bring that up.
I was gonna bring it up after this next one, but we can change the ordering real quick because that is a really good segue.
Yeah.
So our next question is actually directly for you, Ito. It is, what are the main tools / skills you need to know for your work?
I'll break it into 2, which is tools and skills. In terms of tools, that can be kind of hard to answer because as soon as you start working in the industry, you're going to have all sorts of paid, expensive tools that as a college student, you don't have access to. That being said, there are, I should say, free alternatives, right? So like whether at my job, for example, if we're doing disk image analysis and we have a forensic byte for byte copy of a computer, we can analyze that with Axiom, the Magnet suite of software. We have Ncase or Xways, or there's all sorts of various paid products out there. The free alternative would be something like Autopsy or FTK. And that's then kind of the segue into what skills are necessary, right? Skills, dead disk forensics. So being really good at being handed a disk image and knowing what activity might have happened on this host, and then identify, okay, these are the forensic artifacts on this host that I can look at to determine whether or not that activity did occur. I would say being knowledgeable about various attack paths. So like I would say a lot of my analysis is based upon trying to fill in, like, I guess for the sake of example, I'll use the MITRE attack framework, where I'm trying to identify credential access. for example. And so in my head, I know here are 15 different ways that I've observed threat actors steal credentials, whether that's I'm going to dump them from a Veeam database, and then I'm going to decrypt them with the local encryption keys on that computer, or whether that's I'm going to steal your ntds.dit file, or whether that's I'm going to phish your users. There are then going to be different forensic artifacts that I can look at to either confirm or deny those various theories that I have about credential access. So I think it's important to know what data sources are available to you and what sorts of information you can gather out of those data sources. That, I think, is something that comes with experience. And so doing things like NCL and other CTFs and just getting more exposure to various disparate data sources is really important. And other skills that I think are really useful are being able to communicate technical concepts to people who aren't technical. Today I had to present some findings that I had done after analyzing some like firewall logs and some like web app firewall logs to a CISO who was not like a super technical person, and kind of describing those, getting it into literally bullet points on a slide about here's this is threat actor, this is not threat actor, explaining what it means, explaining the context, where, oftentimes those types of forensic artifacts will have nuance to them, whether it's I'm looking at file access on a computer, right? And the forensic artifact that I'm looking at is shell bags that I've extracted from the disk image. And those shell bags might tell me what folders the threat actor was accessing, but they're not going to tell me specifically what files in those folders the threat actor was accessing. And so then when I'm in a conversation with an attorney who's concerned about, did the threat actor steal XYZ files? Were they reading, patient social security numbers that were in that folder? I can't tell them, right? I can only tell them, well, they looked at the folder if my only data source is shell bags. So it's important to really understand your forensic artifacts inside and out. It's important to be able to communicate accurately with people who might not understand those forensic artifacts inside and out. I would say another tool to get good at is like any SIEM platform of any sort, really. Like go spin up your own Elk stack and a little home server or something and learn how to write, I think it's like Lucene or something is what Elk uses. Write queries, learn how to do that. Yeah, thank you, Kiwi. It is basically a way to go through really large amounts of data quickly and identify the things that you're looking for. So, the one that CrowdStrike sells and that we use at work is called LogScale. There is also Splunk. There is also Exabeam. There's all sorts of various ones out there. But like you can go download a free trial of Splunk right now and go put whatever logs you want into it and just teach yourself how to write those queries. And coming into an entry-level role, already knowing how to write Splunk queries would be huge. I think that kind of thing is really important. I spend all day, every day using LogScale. Yeah, I've yapped for a while now, so I'll stop.
Okay, let me get our next question up and ready. Yeah, that was what we were gonna. So, someone's asking if there's any chance we can get some ICS challenges. For those that don't know, ICS stands for Industrial Control Systems. And the answer to that is we've actually kind of had some in the past. We've done Modbus challenges and CAN bus. I know CAN bus isn't necessarily ICS, but it's adjacent. We've had a couple of like ICS challenges in NCL where it's generally packet captures of the data for protocols like I mentioned, Modbus. For those that don't know, that's like one of the big protocols in ICS systems. So that is how a lot of those controlled systems communicate and talk to each other. So we have had some of those.
I think we could develop more of them.
Yeah.
Yay. Maybe we'll see more in the future. And I want to give a shout out to somebody in the comments who nailed one of the log challenges. Great job, Nicholas. Good work.
Okay. We have another pretty quick to answer question up. someone is asking what programming languages are most important for NCL or cybersecurity in general. And that is actually a really easy question. Whatever you are most comfortable with.
Except PHP.
Unless you were trying to break PHP. But I will agree, PHP sucks. Don't use it.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what you're trying to get into, right? So if like you want to get into vulnerability research and low level like aspects of security, you probably want to know C, you probably want to know C++, maybe Rust. And honestly, I would go deeper and I'd say probably some sort of assembly language, whether that's x86, whether that's RISC-V or ARM. Honestly, knowing ARM assembly will guarantee you a job at a numerous amount of companies. If you want to do more scripting, you're looking at Python. If you want to do web app exploitation, definitely look at JavaScript. Definitely look at like learning how to do SQL queries. And if you want to do digital forensics incident response, well,
I would say 99% of the coding that I do is in Python. And the vast majority of the time it's Jupyter notebooks to deal with logs that are really ugly and don't ingest nicely into a seam. Occasionally, right, I'm dealing with malware that is written in a scripting language. So I feel like PowerShell is probably my next most used. Dealing with web shells of various varieties. So whether that's like a ASPX or ASHX web shell written in C++, I see that somewhat frequently. JavaScript, obviously, been dealing with some JSP web shells recently, so Java. I would say just being comfortable with programming languages more generally and the kind of structure of them, knowing how to read a program, I think is really important. Being a full-fledged software developer or something, although there are people, right, who sit and write digital forensics tools that are fully fledged software suites at my job, who write, our internal tools that we build out. So there's a space for all of it.
Okay, our next question is, when will the answer to these challenges come out? So this is a very quick and easy question. I'm going to plug our Discord really quick. If you go there, we have an answers chat for after the game where people go in and they talk about how they solve the challenges. So if you have any like burning questions about how certain challenges worked, you can go there and you can read and talk to a bunch of other players and potentially commiserate with a bunch of other players. So yeah, check out our Discord for that one.
Lick your wounds together.
Yeah, that definitely happened with the challenge about the cat. Moving quickly over, Oak Tree has another question for us. So there was a challenge where you were given a bunch of drones with coordinates, and you were not given the format for the data, so you had to try and piece it together yourself.
Franz went over this on Tuesday when we went over the some of the answers to the most popular or the questions that people wanted answered most. So we answered this live on Tuesday. So if you find the recording on our channel, you should be able to get a very well broken down explanation about how to approach that exact question. So good question, and we have an answer.
Yeah. I'll actually add to that because I think there's some other concepts here too that we can share, like approaching questions where the data format isn't known, right? So the fundamental issue isn't the challenge anymore. Step away from the challenge and then realize that your fundamental issue now is I don't know what this data means. I don't know like what this is in context. I don't know what this does, and I don't have any information about it. So obviously first step is research. You can use AI, go for it. There is a chance that the AI may hallucinate if it doesn't have within its corpus the appropriate information needed to make a determination. So AI could help you if the data format it already knows and it's within its corpus. If it's not, you're going to have to do some research. How do you approach challenges where you have a data format, maybe in a log or something, and you have no idea where it came from, you have no idea what it means, you got to figure it out?
The thing that comes to mind is a anecdote where I was working on an engagement where a threat actor had staged data. So like they took a whole bunch of data from all sorts of different places and then compressed it, put it in a place where they could steal it from, and then stole it. However, the method by which they staged it was not something I'd ever seen before. It wasn't like just zipped and then put in a .zip file. It was effectively completely novel and probably the result of some custom tooling that the threat actor had written themselves specifically for this purpose. And so I spent like a lot of hours sitting at my computer poring over this staged data that I knew was the data that they had stolen, but if you just look at it, it's a bunch of garbled bytes. And after quite a bit of time just kind of staring at it, banging my head into it, using additional data sources beyond the one that I was just looking at from the same system, I was able to kind of piece together exactly how the threat actor had staged that data, and was basically able to ungarble all of the bytes, and was sitting, and it was literally like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sat there with one of my coworkers in a Zoom call with the Cyber Chef window open, and I have like, you know, the whole thing, it's a 2 gigabyte file of just garbled bytes. And I'm like, I bet you if I take this chunk of garbled bytes at this offset and this offset, you know, this piece, and I chuck it into Cyber Chef and I do, you know, XYZ recipe, and then I click render image, it's going to be a JPEG. And lo and behold, and now I'm sitting here staring at, you know, a thing that the threat actor had stolen, and I'm like, oh my God, I did it. But yeah, no, that was purely an anecdote, but I would say the short answer is use data sources other than the log itself, whether that's, you know, Googling on your own and learning more about what you think it might be and how to decode that. I feel like I have some memory of there being like a Ben coded log from a couple NCL challenges ago and like not enjoying that. Like, you know, whether it's doing research that way or whether it's identifying data from, you know, other pieces of information in a given challenge, use everything that's at your disposal. Don't tunnel vision yourself on just the thing that you're confused by.
I would like to throw out there that we have about 15 minutes left. If you have any last minute questions, get them in the Slido thing, and we will try and get to them, but we're probably not going to be able to get to all of them. So I'm trying to like figure out what are probably questions that everyone has based on these. So get your last minute questions in, and moving on to the next question. What were some of your there it rendered up. What were some of your favorite challenges this season?
I don't know if I have a favorite challenge, but I did think it was funny that, you know, I would go to upload my challenge and I was like, how is it that we both have a cat themed challenge? Or how is it that everybody here has a dog themed web challenge? I don't know if we were just like all vibing the same or what. Like none of that was really planned or intentional. Like that just happened that way. Yeah, I thought that was kind of like super. Even I named a challenge Granny, and Kiwi, you had Grandma, and I was like, the similarities here, like it's pretty close.
Yeah, and people were like actually thinking, people were thinking that people built the same challenges because of that. It was literally coincidence. All of it was coincidence, but it was perfect. I
don't know if we should do more of that or like what? Like, do we need to have them like similarly themed, or I don't know how people feel.
I think it makes us look really cool because it seems like we like magically planned all of it out and like did, you know. For me, my favorite challenge was honestly the hardware discovery and the crypto hard. I forgot what it called it. Infinite cosmic power ones. That's sort of, you know, my main hobby, which is hardware security. The hardware discovery challenge is actually built off of a investigation that I did with Rob Joyce for his RGB lights presentation at ShmooCon. So me and him actually took apart this hardware and reverse engineered it and then we figured out how to like build flipper code and HackRF code to control like these light ones. I probably have one around somewhere. But the point is like that was really fun because it tied in directly to a presentation that I helped make for a security conference. And then the infinite cosmic power. I mean, I got some new hardware goodies, and I got to use my chip whisperer to pull power traces off of a FPGA that was doing encryption. I like those challenges because, like, okay, cool, you implemented AES correctly, you did all of your, SBox calculations correctly. You didn't roll your own crypto. Well done. I can still break it because I got the power traces, and I can conduct a side channel attack. And I really like that because crypto has always like been something that I enjoy, but I also hate the fact that like you can't break a good crypto algorithm besides brute forcing. And actually, you can't. You just have to look at it from different ways.
The math might be good, but at the end of the day, the laws of physics are a pain. Okay, moving on to our next question. I'm going to try and make sure we're getting through as many as we can in these last few minutes. Have there ever been challenges no one has been able to solve? Yes, but it's been a long time since we've had no solves. Maybe come fall, we have a no solve. Who knows? A lot of you are really smart. It's kind of hard to get a challenge that nobody's going to solve.
Is that a request? Because I can make a challenge that won't be solved in 3 days, but I don't know if I will be well liked after that. Heck, maybe we can get Eno to make a forensics challenge that's like 18 gigs.
I was going to say, I could come up with some super sneaky forensic stuff if you guys really want something you can't figure out.
Ooh, that would be fun, actually.
Okay, our next question is, I want to be known as a cyber weapon. What should I focus on to reach this goal? This is mostly a joke that Jen put in there so that if nobody asked any questions, we at least had something to kick it off. Jen, your own question.
Oh my gosh. Somebody, straight up told me this when they met me at a conference recently. I don't know, if you're going to be a cyber weapon, I think just you really got to throw yourself at the wall into everything. I do think NCL is a great place to start because it does have a bunch of different domains that you can investigate and then kind of go from there. I don't know. I think you need to define cyber weapon a little bit more. That would be my feedback to that person.
Yeah, we've received these types of questions before, and I get these questions a lot, especially because I mentor in colleges. And the reality is, if you're looking to make yourself a cyber weapon, no offense, but you're probably not right for this field. You are setting yourself up to be either a criminal or a tool to be used by someone, and neither one is going to support you in the long term. And I understand the allure behind it. I have a lot of friends who were caught doing security stuff that was black hat, and they had to face the consequences. And at the end of it all, they were like, it wasn't worth it. I didn't make as much money as I make now working legally. And I lost, 3, 5, 10, 15 years of my life. It's just not worth it. I mean, go ahead for it if you really want to, but I can tell you it's not worth it. Let's
keep rolling through the questions.
Yeah.
We got 5 minutes left.
Yeah. Gonna try and lightning round as many as we can. So any recommendations for us to prep for the fall season? There's plenty of other smaller CTFs like Pico CTF. That's one that people like to point towards a lot. Just keep at it and
sleep.
Sleep.
Yeah, Make sure you sleep.
Yeah, sleep. Keep learning. Keep growing. Pick up that tool that you haven't yet. Go read through the NCL chat from these past games.
Read through the NCL chat. Go do some CTFs. Right, summer is a prime time to go do CTFs. Pico Gym, Pwn College, Burp Suite Academy, if that's your thing. If you have any recommendations on DFIR, training stuff that is free and open source, or at least free.
When I was in college and had free time like that, I really liked doing Cyber Defenders. I think it's cyberdefender.org. They've got good challenges that are disk forensics, memory forensics, all sorts of fun stuff. The other one that's pretty good is Hack the Box. I say new, but it's new to me. A feature called Sherlock's, that are little mini kind of, generally smaller challenges that are forensic related that I enjoy, and they're pretty fun. Yeah, those are my two.
Okay, we have another question, which we can answer really quickly. How do you get involved with writing questions and making challenges? I cannot necessarily speak on how you can do that with us, but just in general, if you volunteer, like a lot of local B-sides that run their own CTF, it's normally just one or two people. They would probably gladly have a third person volunteering, and it's a challenge in its own. So find a vulnerability you like, and then make a challenge around it. Make an environment where you can reproduce that.
Another recommendation I would make is go and see if there's any universities near you that have like CTFs that they run. A lot of universities across the US run their own CTFs. And again, they would love the help. I promise you, you will not be turned away if you show up and you say, I want to learn, I want to support you, and I want to make CTF challenges. Because, yeah, it is usually just one or two people cranking out like 30 of these over months.
It looks like, because I'm looking at the rest of the questions, it looks like we've answered most of the important ones that
Yeah, with the last one, I feel like it's a lot. I interpret it as how did you get into it, not like how do you.
Oh,
like how did you get into writing challenges? It's not up there anymore, Tristan.
Yeah, let me.
You made it disappear.
Oh. Remove the share. Yeah, like we'll in that case, with that perspective, Jen,
question.
do you wanna elaborate a little?
Honestly, I did a lot of other CTFs. I mean, I've done NCL. I'm a former NCL player. I've done a lot of other CTFs, and I remember being in one Discord thread, and I was like, "Man, this is really cool. I would love to like be able to like do this, like and make this." I have no idea how I actually ended up here, though. Like, in all honesty, like sometimes it's just how things have worked out. But I think if you have a passion for it, you're gonna eventually fall into what you're going to do. And that just seems so silly now that I've like made it here, but like that's because I'm here and I'm looking back and not when I'm like in that moment of like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to go or what I'm going to do. And sometimes you just have to like go out and meet people. I think that's the number one way. Like a lot of these challenges and these competitions, the developers are there at conferences, like go meet them, go say hello, introduce yourself, say you're interested in doing it. And I think like that would, that's kind of how you get into doing this.
Yeah, in my case, I never knew I'd be like making CTF challenges as part of my job. Like I got involved because I played NCL in college with some friends, and then I volunteered to help with the former players committee, and then I got introduced to Cyber Skyline, and I started making.
We do have a couple of questions that are like popped in the chat. I don't think I slipped them in whatever the name of that platform is. Slido.
Somebody asked for a listing of challenge creators so they know who to hold a grudge against. The answer is me. It's always me. It is always me. Hold a grudge
Kiwi,
against
1,000%.
I'll happily take all of your grudges.
I think we have time for one more, and it's just in the chat, not in Slido. Looks like Alexandra asks, have you all ever gotten discouraged? How do you deal with it? And the very quick answer is that everyone does, and just kind of to leave it on like a positive thinking note, like go take a break, take a walk, get some sleep, come back. A lot of the times that's all you need to do.
Now I'll tell myself to go touch grass, and then I'll go with my dog for a walk, and I'll come back, and then I'm good. Like I'm back on a roll. Or have a rubber ducky. I don't know if you've ever heard of the rubber ducky concept. Have a rubber ducky that you talk to while you're working through your challenges.
Yeah. Take care of yourself. That's the important thing. Like, That is like the very important bit. Just make sure you take care of yourself because you have to be healthy to solve these problems. And on that note, I would like to thank Eno. Thank you for taking time to come and chat with us about NCL.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate it. And then thanks to the audience for coming in, listening to us talk for an hour. We hope that we provided you with value.
Before we sign off.
Oh, yeah.
Tomorrow.
Before we sign up. Thank you, Jen.
It's the big day. Tomorrow. It's the award ceremony. Y'all got to come and check it out and see who won. And we'll kind of wrap up Spirit Week there. So this was super fun, like you were saying. So yeah, come join us. We'll be in there. Not everybody will be on there, but we'll all be here. Come chat.
Okay.
Yay.
We are still.
Goodbye, everyone. It's been good.
It's been good.